So hello guys, and welcome to another video, and last week I saw Sonic 3, and I wanted to give my thoughts on it. I was originally going to make a video about this immediately after I saw it, but I didn't really have time since I was making the 12 Days of Switchmas series, so yeah, I just waited until now. Now I had a little more time for my thoughts on this movie to kind of sit in. I had like a little bit of time to just think about it. But yeah, Sonic 3 is incredible. I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I would say it's probably my favorite video game adaptation, tied with the Mario movie. And quality-wise, I would say it probably is even better than the Mario movie, but I am just kind of biased, since, like, Mario is my favorite video game series of all time, and I just love the amount of references in that movie. But honestly, Sonic 3 does kind of a similar thing that the Mario movie did in terms of, like, adapting elements from the game into the movie. I don't think it went quite as hard as the Mario movie in terms of, like, references to the games, but it did much better than the first two movies did. Like, Sonic 3 felt much more like a Sonic movie than the first two movies. And don't get me wrong, the first two movies were good. I did enjoy them, but I just feel like 3 did a better job in that regard. It's almost like they saw the Mario movie and just, like, realized, like, how well that adapted, like, the Mario series into movie form, and just kind of did the same thing with Sonic 3, because Sonic 3 is basically an adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, yes, they do take some liberties in order for it to work within the movie universe. I'm not gonna go into any spoilers in this video, but there was one thing that was shown in the trailers, like the fact that Shadow came from, like, he was on an island rather than, like, Space Colony arc. So that is a little bit of a difference, but it kind of makes sense when you consider that the movie is, like, the movie universe is more grounded, and that would make sense, like, for the context of this universe and everything. It still did show a lot of the things, like, from Sonic Adventure 2, and, like, was kind of reminiscent of that, like, with Shadow's backstory, with Maria, and Gerald Robotnik and everything. So, I'm not gonna go into any details, but I do think that was handled well, and it definitely was pretty impactful to the movie and everything. And speaking of Gerald Robotnik, he was actually handled pretty well. Like, the fact that he was actually alive here, when he was dead in Sonic Adventure 2, actually worked surprisingly well. Like, I mean, it would be spoilery if I went into the details with how I liked him in the movie and everything, but I do think he was handled pretty well and wasn't jarring. I was definitely expecting it to be pretty jarring and unfitting at first, but it surprisingly worked. Like, I am actually surprised by that, and I actually thought the jokes with Jim Carrey as, like, Eggman and Gerald Robotnik actually worked pretty well. Like, they were pretty funny a lot of the times. I mean, yeah, there were some jokes that didn't land. Like, that happens, like, I mean, that happens with, like, every, like, movie still kind of geared towards kids. But there were a lot of jokes that I quite liked in this movie, I would say. And I feel like the jokes were a lot better than Sonic 1 and 2, I would say. It was definitely a lot funnier, but at the same time it was also more serious, too. Like, there was a pretty good balance between that, I would say. Like, it definitely... Like, the movie kind of knew when to, like, make jokes and knew when to have, like, a more, like, serious or emotional moment. Like, I think that was, like, handled pretty well here. I definitely feel like it was written pretty well. There were, like, a few moments that were, like, kind of off or didn't land quite well, but I still think it was pretty good for the most part. Definitely a lot better in that department than the first two, like I was saying, but yeah. And, like, just all of the action scenes in this movie were incredible as well. Like, a lot of people were saying, like, that this movie was basically, like, it kind of felt like a live-action Dragon Ball Z movie at times, and I can kind of understand where a lot of people are coming from, like, especially with a lot of the scenes, like, where Sonic and Shadow are fighting. Like, those went incredibly hard, and were really cool to watch. And were definitely some of the highlights of this movie, to me. Like, either like towards the beginning or like other parts of the movie. I definitely don't want to get into it because I don't want to ruin the surprise. Like the final 30 minutes of this movie were just incredible. Without going into any details of it, it was just outstanding and elevated this movie so much, I would say. Like, it definitely takes a lot of notes from Sonic Adventure 2's emotional moments. And just the fact that this is based on Sonic Adventure 2 is incredible. I love the fact that, that they did that, because Sonic Adventure 2 is my favorite Sonic story, I would say. It definitely is pretty iconic, like, especially with the fact that it introduces Shadow, and it's definitely the perfect way of introducing Shadow into the movie universe. Like, I don't really know how else they would handle Shadow in the movie universe, like, unless they would just adapt Sonic Adventure 2 like they did. And yeah, like, Sonic Adventure 2, I'm glad it's getting a lot more attention now between Sonic 3 and Shadow Generations, because it is definitely an amazing game. I know a lot of people have been praising it over the years. That does receive like a fair bit of criticism as well, because it's not a perfect game, but the story is great, and it definitely is a pretty iconic game. And yeah, and also like Shadow as well. I'm glad Shadow has been receiving a lot more attention lately with the Year of Shadow, and Shadow was handled pretty well in the movie, I would say. Like, I would definitely say that this is a great way of adapting him. Like, this was probably, like, I know I'm a little biased, because, like, Shadow is my favorite Sonic character, but I feel like he was probably handled the best out of any of the movie universe characters. Like, he was voiced pretty well, like, by Keanu Reeves. I think Keanu Reeves was actually a pretty good fit. I know, like, a lot of people were expecting him to voice Shadow, like, before it was even announced, but it worked well. Like, I was definitely a little surprised, because sometimes, like celebrity voice acting, like, doesn't always work, but I feel like Keanu Reeves was a good fit for Shadow, I would say. It was pretty funny hearing him, in the game as well, with the DLC for Shadow Generations, but yeah. And I also feel like some characters had, like, better roles in this movie, too. Like, I feel like Tails appeared, like, a little more in this movie, or was a little more significant in this movie than he was in Sonic 2, because I feel like in Sonic 2, he was kind of shafted a little bit because of Knuckles. In this time, I feel like Knuckles and Tails kind of have, like, a more balanced screen time this time. Like, it definitely feels like, I mean, yes, this movie is definitely mostly focused on Sonic and Shadow, but I do feel like they did highlight Knuckles and Tails enough here, and did it pretty well. There were definitely some good moments with Tails and everything. So yeah, he was definitely handled a lot better than he was in Sonic 2. But yeah, and another thing about this movie, like, compared to the previous movies, is the fact that it was, like, this is kind of going back to my point with the fact that this is more of a Sonic movie than the other two. That is, there weren't really as many moments with, like, the human characters as much, and the moments that they did have with them made sense, and were kind of, like, fitting for, like, the pacing and everything. This movie didn't have perfect pacing. It did have some problems with pacing, because I feel like it could have had, like, an extra maybe 15 minutes, I would say, but it did work for the pacing when they did have, like, a couple moments with, like, the human characters and everything, kind of, like, just taking a little break from the action and everything. It did feel balanced pretty well there, and I definitely appreciated it. And, like, I don't want to get into spoilers, but yeah, I do feel like they handled the human characters a lot better. There was nothing, like, on the level of, like, the wedding scene in Sonic 2. I know that's, like, the infamous thing that everybody goes on about that movie, but yeah, I think it was handled pretty well here. There was definitely a pretty good balance. But yeah, I think Sonic 3 was great. I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely gonna see it again pretty soon. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Blue Sky if you want to. Goodbye.